A senior Hamas official said Friday the group will respond, quote, very soon to a proposal to temporarily pause fighting in Gaza. The deal would include exchanges of Hamas-held hostages for Palestinians imprisoned in Israel. It's been over 2 months since a one-week truce back in November. More than 100 hostages were released during that time. For more on Gaza, we welcome Rob Geist Pinfold to the program. He is a lecturer in peace and security at Durham University School of Government and International Affairs. Thank you so much for being with us here today on France 24.
Thank you.
There are huge levels of anxiety in Rafah right now. If the Israeli military moves in, there is literally nowhere left for hundreds of thousands of people to flee. So can you help us understand a little bit, what is Israel's thinking behind this move?
Well, it's endemic of Israel's operational doctrine during this whole campaign. It was basically founded on the assumption that Israel would only have to enter northern Gaza and take control there. That was supposedly where the Hamas strongholds were, and that would be enough to basically degrade and destroy Hamas's abilities to confront Israel. Now, that's been proven wrong, and as a result, Israel has been incrementally expanding its military campaign and going further and further south. As you mentioned, they're currently in Khan Yunis, which is around the south-central area of the Gaza Strip, and now they want to push into Rafah, which is, I guess, the final southern enclave on the border between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. And there was initially a debate in Israel about how to go in, how to launch its ground invasion, and there was a potential plan on the table for a comprehensive invasion of all of the territory. That was vetoed in favor of action in the north instead. So the fact that Israel is having to expand itself demonstrates that it hasn't met its operational goals just by limiting fighting to the north.
We've been seeing hundreds of people, civilians, killed each day in Gaza as Israel carries out these strikes against Hamas. I mean, with the amount of crowding, you have over half of the population of Gaza now crowded into Rafah and the surrounding areas. I mean, it just sounds like a recipe for disaster if now you have troops in there.
Well, it's not just a recipe for disaster, it's an unfolding humanitarian disaster that we're seeing at the moment. And again, this is the product of Israel's flawed plan. It thought that it could move Gaza's civilians southwards, away from, for example, Gaza City. And if it would concentrate them in the south, it would be able to distinguish between Hamas operatives and Gaza's civilians. Now, that hasn't happened. It thought there were hostages in the north. There were some, but not the large numbers of hostages that Israel thought would be there, and of course Hamas's commanders either were in the south all along or managed to flee south. So there is a military imperative for Israel to enter, because it has to, in its mind, achieve its war aims of releasing the hostages and defeating Hamas militarily. It feels like it can't do that at the moment, but as you say, there is simply nowhere else for these civilians to go. The only other option really is that Israel starts resettling them back up north. But actually, that's where fighting has started to slowly reignite, despite the fact that Israel has controlled a lot of those parts of the Gaza Strip since November. So Israel really faces a quandary, and the issue is that we have this unfolding humanitarian catastrophe that is only going to get worse whilst the fighting continues.
Right. You mentioned fighting reigniting in the northern part of Gaza as well. I mean, are we seeing Hamas operatives moving back into the north as well?
That is once again less a symptom of Hamas's success and ability to demonstrate resolve, and more of Israel's failure to demonstrate and operationalize some kind of a coherent plan that would see them convert those early military successes into long-term political goals. Now, the reason Hamas has been able to reassert itself in areas like Bet Hanun in northern Gaza is simply because there is a power vacuum there. Israeli soldiers have pulled out, but at the same time, the Israeli government refuses to be responsible for the civilian, for the welfare of civilian Gazans. It refuses to take a role in municipal government. It doesn't want to do that, but at the same time, it's ruling out the Palestinian Authority, for example. It's ruling out a ceasefire. So Hamas takes charge in terms of those responsibilities for everyday governance, simply because there's no other actor on the ground that's willing or able to do so. So again, it's Israel's failure to plan and implement a plan for a post-war Gaza. It's exactly the same mistakes, by the way, we saw happening in the Iraq invasion of 2003. History is very much repeating itself in the Gaza Strip.
Rob, I want to ask you one more question about these temporary truce negotiations as well. Qatar says that Hamas had given its, quote, initial support to a hostage prisoner exchange deal. In your opinion, what is Hamas still weighing when considering whether to take this deal?
The long and short of it is that Hamas wants Israel out of the Gaza Strip. It wants this campaign over as soon as possible, and that would necessitate a comprehensive Israeli withdrawal, so Hamas can then say, we have survived Israel's campaign. Israel, of course, wants the exact opposite. They want a temporary truce, albeit a longer one than it's previously been willing to accept, in exchange for all of the hostages. There is simply no reason for Hamas to free all the hostages if it thinks the campaign is going to continue. And at the same time, Israel won't agree to leave the Gaza Strip, because then it will be tacitly admitting it's failed to degrade and destroy Hamas. Hamas will simply take power in the territory all over again. So that is the logjam that both sides are facing at present. There might be some wiggle room for something more limited, but at the moment, Hamas really isn't budging on its demand to get Israel out of the Gaza Strip, and Israel in turn will refuse to commit to such a policy without being able to achieve victory.
Rob Geist Pinfold from Durham University, thank you so much for your time and analysis. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.